The sound of a Ming Dynasty vase shattering against marble floors isn't just a crash. It sounds like the end of the world. My 5-year-old daughter Ava froze her small hands, trembling as blue and white shards scattered across the Persian rug. I reached for her, but my father's voice cut through the room like a whip. He didn't ask if she was hurt. He didn't care that she was crying. He just stared at the broken porcelain, his face purple with rage, and screamed. He yelled that I was breeding incompetence, that I was trash, ruining his legacy. Then, in front of the mayor and half the country club, he pointed to the door and told us to get out. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I walked to my car in the driveway of the Savannah estate, holding Ava's hand so tight my knuckles turned white. My mother, Sarah, stood on the porch. She didn't offer a hug. She didn't apologize. She just watched us leave with a look of cold annoyance, as if we were a stain on her evening she couldn't wait to scrub out. As I buckled Ava into her car seat, a strange cold clarity washed over me. My father was screaming about his legacy, about the cost of that vase, about the sanctity of his estate. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. They didn't know. They had no idea that the vase, the rug it shattered on the porch my mother stood on, and the vintage wine they were drinking inside. I paid for all of it. For 5 years I had been the silent engine keeping their aristocratic lifestyle running. They thought I was the black sheep, the failure who dabbled in computers while they managed the family fortune. In reality, I was the founder of Etheria, a global logistics AI company valued at $112 million. I drove through the iron gates, the ones I paid to have restored last year, and I finally let myself ask the question I had been avoiding for a decade. Why? Why did I do it? Why did I send $8,500 to my parents and $4,500 to my siblings Blake and Madison every single month? Why did I fund the very people who treated me like a servant in my own home? It's a trap many of us fall into, isn't it? I call it the survivor's invisible chain. You see, when you grow up as the scapegoat, the one who is never good enough, you don't just leave. You internalize the rejection. You start to believe that love is a transaction. I thought that if I just gave enough, if I quietly fixed every financial hole they dug, if I became the invisible safety net, they would eventually have to love me. I wasn't being generous. I was paying a tax. I was paying a ransom for a place at a table where I was never actually welcome. I thought I was buying belonging. But tonight, as I watched my daughter cry over a piece of pottery that mattered more to my father than she did the chain finally snapped, I realized I hadn't been buying love. I had been financing my own abuse. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace the floor. I sat at the small desk in our hotel room, watching the sun rise over the Savannah River. Ava was finally asleep, her breathing the only sound in the room, a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the absolute silence in my head. You might expect that after being thrown out of my childhood home, after being humiliated in front of the town's elite, I would be a wreck. You might think I'd be crying into a pillow, wondering what I did wrong. But the tears had dried up somewhere on the drive over. Grief is heavy, messy, and confusing. What I felt now was weightless. It was the cold, sharp clarity of a surgeon stepping up to the operating table. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim light, illuminating the face of a woman I barely recognized, someone harder, sharper. I logged into my private banking portal. The interface was familiar, a grid of numbers and scheduled transactions that I had looked at 1,000 times before. But today, they didn't look like generosity. They looked like theft. There it was. The Wilson Family Trust. A lie I had constructed to save their pride. A monthly hemorrhage of $13,000 designed to buy a love that didn't exist. I clicked on the standing order for my parents. $8,500. Status pending. Scheduled for the 1st of the month. That money paid for the mortgage on the estate, the landscaping that kept the grounds pristine, the country club dues, and the endless stream of vintage wines my father drank while calling me a failure. I moved the cursor to the cancel button. My finger hovered over the trackpad. For a split second, the old conditioning kicked in, the fear that if I stopped paying, the sky would fall. The fear that I would be the bad daughter. Then I looked at Ava sleeping in the bed, her face still puffy from crying over a vase. I clicked. Status canceled. I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. Like I had just set down a backpack full of stones I'd been carrying since I was 10 years old. Next, I scrolled to the transfers for my siblings. Blake and Madison, $4,500 each. Every single month. Rent for their luxury apartments in the historic district. Leases on cars they couldn't afford. Allowances so they could play at being aristocrats without ever having to work a real day in their lives. I thought about Blake laughing as my father screamed at me. I thought about Madison checking her phone bored while I was being evicted from my own family. Click, cancelled. Click, cancelled. It took less than 60 seconds to dismantle their entire reality. I closed the laptop and ordered room service. For the first time in years, breakfast tasted like food, not anxiety. The fallout didn't take long. The financial guillotine is swift, but the screams come later. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother, Sarah. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again. And again. 7 times. In 10 minutes. I finally answered, putting it on speaker so I could keep typing my emails. Olivia. Her voice was high, tight, vibrating with a panic I had never heard before. Something is wrong with the bank. Your father is at the club, he's at the club, Olivia, and his card was declined. The waiter came back to the table and told him in front of everyone. It wasn't declined, Mom, I said, my voice steady. It was empty. What are you talking about? The trust transfer. It's the first of the month. You need to call the bank immediately. It must be a glitch. There is no glitch, I said. I canceled it. The silence on the other end was so profound I could hear the static of the line. You? What? I canceled the transfers. All of them. The mortgage, the allowances, the club dues. It's over. You can't do that, she snapped, the panic turning instantly to rage. That is our money. That is the family trust. You can't just cut us off because you're having a tantrum about a vase. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Your father had to call me to bring a check. I imagine that was embarrassing, I said. Almost as embarrassing as being kicked out of your parents' house in front of your daughter. This is petty, Olivia. It is beneath you. You are going to fix this right now. Blake just texted me that his rent autodraft bounced. He is furious. Do you want your brother to be evicted? I want him to get a job, I said. Or maybe he can sell that Range Rover I paid for. You are being cruel, she hissed. We raised you. We gave you everything. And now, because of one little argument, you're going to ruin us. You owe us, Olivia. You owe us respect. I don't owe you a dime, I said. I paid for the house you're standing in. I paid for the clothes on your back. And in exchange, you treated me like garbage. The subscription has been canceled, Mom. You're on your own. I hung up before she could scream again. Then I blocked the number. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from Blake. What the fuck, Olivia? My landlord just called. Fix this, or I'm coming over. I looked at the message and felt nothing. No fear, no obligation. Just the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet, finally zeroing out. They weren't sad they had lost me. They were terrified they had lost their ATM. And for the first time in my life, I was perfectly okay with that. I didn't stop at canceling the transfers. I knew my family. I knew that when you corner a rat, it doesn't just bite. It lies. I needed to make sure my exit was airtight. I needed to know exactly where every cent had gone, not just for my own peace of mind, but because I suspected my father wouldn't go down without trying to claim some kind of legal ownership over his money. 2 days after the phone calls stopped, replaced by a wall of stony, ominous silence, I hired Marcus. He wasn't a family lawyer. He was a forensic accountant who usually worked for the FBI dismantling corporate embezzlement schemes. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly good at following money trails. I sat in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Savannah, watching him slide a thick file across the mahogany table. You wanted a clean break, Olivia Marcus, said his voice dry and professional. But you don't have a simple dependency case here. You have a laundering operation. I blinked. Laundering, I was giving them the money. It wasn't illegal. The source wasn't illegal, Marcus corrected. But the way your father processed it, that's a different story. Look at this. He opened the file. It was a spider web of transactions. I saw my monthly deposits entering my parents' joint account. But instead of staying there to pay bills, the money was immediately moved. Every month, like clockwork, $8,500 was transferred to a shell company called Sterling Horizon Investments. Then 3 days later, it was transferred back into my father's personal account labeled as dividend payout or capital gains. Why? I asked, staring at the circular flow of cash. Why? Move it just to move it back. Because of the narrative, Marcus said. He pulled up a second document. It was a newsletter. The Savannah Elite Investors Weekly. There on page 3 was a profile of my father, Donald Wilson. The headline read, "The Oracle of the South, How Donald Wilson Consistently Beats the Market." The air left the room. I felt a cold, sick sensation in my stomach that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the depth of his delusion. "He wasn't just living off you," Marcus explained, tapping the paper. "He was washing your charity to make it look like genius. He told your siblings, the country club, and half of Georgia that he was a stock market prodigy. Those dividends, that was your money coming back home wearing a different costume. He built a reputation as a financial wizard entirely on the back of your silent deposits." I sat back, the leather chair creaking in the silence. It all made sense. The arrogance, the way he lectured me about business, the way Blake and Madison looked at him with awe while sneering at my tech career. They didn't just respect him because he was their father. They respected him because they thought he was generating wealth. He had looked me in the eye for 5 years, called me a failure, and then cashed my checks to prove to the world that he was a success. "He's a fraud," I whispered. "He's a Ponzi scheme of one," Marcus agreed. "And here's the kicker. He convinced your brother Blake to invest his own savings into Sterling Horizon last month. $10,000. Your father took that money and used it to pay the country club dues when your transfer was late 2 months ago. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing my credit. He was cannibalizing his own golden children to keep the lights on. He had built a glass castle on a foundation of lies, and I had just taken a sledgehammer to the only support beam he had." "What do we do?" I asked. Marcus closed the file. "We don't do anything illegal. We just hand him the truth. This isn't just a family dispute anymore, Olivia. This is fraud. If his investors, aka your siblings or his friends, find out the fund is empty, he goes to prison. You hold the evidence." I took the file. It was heavy. It felt like holding a loaded gun. My father wanted a legacy. I was about to give him one. I didn't have to wait long for the confrontation. When you starve a parasite, it doesn't just wither away quietly. It comes hunting for the host. 2 days after I received the forensic report, my executive assistant Sarah buzzed my intercom. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge of tension in it. "Miss Wilson, your father is in the lobby. Security has asked him to wait, but he's escalating. He says he's not leaving until you fix the glitch." I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office on the 40th floor. Etheria headquarters was a fortress of glass and steel, a monument to the logistical empire I had built while my family was busy mocking me. Down there on the street level, Donald Wilson was used to being a big fish. Up here, he was just a visitor without a pass. "Let him in," I said, "but keep security close." I took the elevator down to the lobby. It was a vast, intimidating space designed to impress global investors, filled with polished concrete and silent, purposeful employees. My father stood by the reception desk, looking completely out of place. He was wearing his signature linen suit, but it looked rumpled like he hadn't slept. His face was flushed, his movements jerky and frantic. He was screaming at the receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified. "I am her father," he bellowed, slamming his hand on the marble counter. "You tell her to get down here right now, or I will have your job." "Dad," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the lobby it carried. He spun around. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed into slits. He marched toward me, finger pointed like a weapon. "You," he hissed. "You fix this. Now. Do you know what happened at the bank today? They froze the accounts. Everything, even the investment fund. They said there was an irregularity. You need to call them and tell them to release the funds." He stopped a foot away from me, looming, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me the way he had when I was 12. "You've had your little tantrum, Olivia. Now put the money back." I didn't flinch, I didn't step back, I just looked at him. And for the first time, I truly saw him. There is a concept in social psychology called the illusion of power or the empty wallet phenomenon. We often mistake money for character. We think that because someone stands tall, wears expensive clothes, and commands a room, they possess an innate strength. But my father was proof that for some men, dignity is a rental property. His confidence, his authority, his aristocratic aura, it was all a costume I had paid for. He wasn't a king. He was a tenant in a castle I built. And now that the rent was due and his pockets were empty, the man standing in front of me wasn't a patriarch. He was just a desperate, fragile old man terrified of being seen. There is no irregularity, I said, my voice calm, factual, lethal. And I won't be calling the bank. What are you talking about? He spat. I have investors. I have friends who trust me with their money. If those checks bounce... They already bounced, I interrupted. I held out the file Marcus had given me. It was thick, heavy, with the weight of 5 years of lies. This is a forensic audit of Sterling Horizon Investments. It details every transfer I sent you and every transfer you laundered to make yourself look like a genius. He froze. He looked at the file like it was a venomous snake. He didn't take it. I know, I said, stepping closer. I know you aren't a stock market wizard. I know you didn't invest a dime. I know you took my charity and sold it to Blake and Madison as your own brilliance. And I know you took Blake's $10,000 last month to pay for your country club dues. His face went from red to a sickly shade of gray. The bluster evaporated. The Southern gentleman posture collapsed, his shoulders curling inward, as if he were trying to physically shrink away from the truth. Olivia, he whispered, his voice trembling. You don't understand. It's complicated. I had to maintain appearances. For the family. No, I said. For you. You did it for your ego. If this gets out, he pleaded, glancing around the lobby to see if anyone was listening. If people find out, I'll be ruined. I could go to jail. You should have thought about that before you stole from your son, I said. I'm not going to the police, Dad. Not yet. But I am giving this file to Blake and Madison. Today. You can't, he begged, reaching for my arm. A security guard stepped forward, instantly blocking him. My father recoiled, looking at the guard, then back at me, realizing for the first time that he had no power here. I already did, I lied. I hadn't sent it yet, but I needed him to feel the walls closing in. The bank didn't make an error, Dad. The investor just pulled out. I turned my back on him and walked toward the elevators. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but it wasn't a command anymore. It was a whimper. The Emperor had no clothes, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to offer him a blanket. I didn't watch him leave. I didn't need to. Security footage would later show Donald Wilson, the man who once strode through Savannah like a king, being gently but firmly escorted out of the building by 2 guards. He didn't fight them. He looked deflated, a suit that had suddenly lost its occupant. Back in my office, I sat at my desk. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt the cool hum of the air conditioning and the steady rhythm of a problem being solved. I opened my email client. I attached the forensic report Marcus had compiled, the bank statements. The shell company transfers the proof of the stolen $10,000 from Blake. I typed 2 recipients, Blake and Madison. Subject line, the trust fund. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't try to justify myself. I just wrote, Dad didn't make the money. I did. And he didn't invest your savings. He spent them. Click. Sent. The collapse of the Wilson dynasty didn't happen over years. It happened over hours. It turns out when you build a family on greed and pretension, loyalty is the first casualty. Within 20 minutes of that email landing, my phone lit up with a text from Blake. It wasn't an apology to me. It was a screenshot of a text he had sent Dad. A string of expletives and threats that would make a sailor blush. The next few weeks were a masterclass in self-destruction. Without my monthly injection of $8,500, the estate's mortgage went into default immediately. My mother, Sarah, tried to keep up appearances for a week, hosting a garden party. She couldn't afford catering to a credit card that was already maxed out. But rumors in a small southern town travel faster than light. The news of my father's fraud leaked, likely from one of the investors he had swindled. The southern aristocracy facade shattered. The country club revoked their membership quietly but permanently. The neighbors stopped waving. The invitations to galas stopped coming. And the family turned on itself. Blake and Madison didn't rally around our parents. They were furious that the free ride was over. Blake sued our father for the return of his $10,000, a public filing that made the local papers. Madison moved in with a boyfriend she barely knew just to escape the house. They stripped the estate of anything valuable silver art electronics before the bank could seize it. I watched it all from a distance like reading a news report about a foreign country. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a market correction. The value of the Wilson name had been artificially inflated for years, and finally the bubble had burst. 6 months later, the air smells different. It smells like salt and hibiscus. I'm sitting on the lanai of a small open-air house on the north shore of Kauai. It isn't a mansion. There are no Ming Dynasty vases here. Just sturdy teak furniture, open windows, and the sound of the Pacific Ocean crashing against the reef. Ava is playing in the sand a few yards away. She's laughing, building a castle that the tide will eventually wash away. And she doesn't care. She knows she can just build another one. She isn't afraid of mistakes anymore. My phone rings. It's a number I don't recognize, but the area code is from Savannah. I answer it, putting it on speaker as I watch the waves. Olivia. It's my mother. Her voice sounds thin, older. We lost the house, she says. We're in a rental apartment on the outskirts. Your father. He just sits in the dark. He won't talk. I say nothing, I just listen to the ocean. We miss you, she says, and then comes the hook. We were thinking, maybe we could come visit. Just for a week. We could start over. We could be a family again. There is a profound lie we tell ourselves about family. We tell ourselves that blood is a binding contract. We tell ourselves that no matter how toxic, how draining, or how cruel someone is, we owe them our presence because we share DNA. But that is the logic of a hostage, not a family member. No, I say. But Olivia, we're your parents. You can't just cut us off forever. I can, I say gently. And I have. There's a concept I've been thinking about lately, the distinction between origin and destiny. You cannot choose where you come from. You cannot choose the people who gave you life, but you can choose the people who get to stay in it. Walking away wasn't an act of cruelty, Mom. It was an act of survival. I had to amputate the limb to save the body. I had to let go of the bloodline to find myself. I don't hate you, I say. I just don't need you. And I won't let you near Ava again. Olivia, please. I hang up. I block the number. I put the phone down on the table. Ava looks up from her sandcastle. Who was that, Mommy? Just a wrong number, baby, I say. And it's the truth. They were the wrong people for us. They always were. I walk down the steps to the sand. Ava runs to me, her hands covered in grit, her smile wide and unburdened. I pick her up, swinging her around until she squeals with delight. We are not aristocracy. We are not a legacy. We are just free. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience.